Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to today's Enterprise Connect webinar, Accelerating Actionable AI in the Contact Center, sponsored by Genesys and Google Cloud and broadcast by Informa. I'm Eric Kraft with Enterprise Connect, and I'll be your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar is designed to be interactive. The dock of widgets at the bottom of your screen will allow you to learn about today's speakers, download resources, share this webinar via social media outlets, and participate in the Q&A session that takes place at the end of our presentation. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. You may also download a copy of the slides via the resources widget. Toward the end of our webinar, we'll ask you to complete our survey found on the right-hand side of your screen. Please take a minute to fill this out before leaving us today, as your feedback will provide us with valuable information on how we can improve future events. Lastly, if you're experiencing any technical problems, please click the Help widget found at the bottom of your screen or type your issue into the Q&A area, and we'll be glad to offer one-on-one assistance. And now on to the presentation, Accelerating Actionable AI in the Contact Center. Discussing today's topic will be Sheila McGee-Smith, President and Principal Analyst at McGee-Smith Analytics, Elsinora Martinez, Global Vice President of Product Management at Genesys, and Rajan Sheth, Vice President, Google Cloud AI and Industry Solutions. And Sheila, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome everyone. So today we're talking about accelerating actionable AI in the contact center. So where did we choose our topic from? Many enterprises for the last 2, 3, 4 years have been moving slowly to adopt artificial intelligence in their contact centers. But the current environment, what we've all gone through for the last 6 months, has really accelerated rollouts to deal with urgent new demands. And organizations have found that they can implement artificial intelligence and get measurable benefits much more quickly than they ever thought that they could, with some implementations going live in as few as 15 days. So I'm going to be asking questions and participating in conversation with Elsinora and Rajan here. And we're going to sort of pace through these topics smoothly. Immediate challenges, and then what the initial deployments and learnings were, and then what's next? What's step 2 for companies that did do some artificial intelligence deployments earlier? We'll talk about artificial intelligence and the agent experience, consumer acceptance of AI, and then sort of the market in general and how acceptance has been. And finally, we'll talk about just-in-time innovation, how quickly new innovative technologies and use cases can be added to what's been done, primarily from the work that vendors like Google and Genesys are doing. So let's get started with immediate challenges. And so first I'm going to ask Elsinora, as you look back over the past few months, what are some of the examples of the immediate challenges that customers were able to address with rapid deployment of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, some of the immediate challenges we saw so many of the customers realize immediately in terms of increased volumes, either through their call centers or some of these, digital channels. So it was increased volumes with fewer agents as companies thought about how to adapt to the work from home environment. And frankly, all of a sudden, they needed to make sense of all of this data that was being generated, which is really where AI thrives. And so we were able to see a lot of companies that may have had AI earlier on in their 2020 strategic plans really accelerate the decision-making around how to solve some of these challenges. Some of the use cases that we saw really quickly, and Sheila, as you alluded to, in as little as 2 weeks, were things like FAQ bots around, the new operating procedures, hours of operations, how to initiate a return, just some of these things that all of a sudden you couldn't readily find available. inquiries, questions around benefit eligibilities, a lot of the emergency response. And so, a huge number of use cases really around disseminating and getting information out quickly in a self-service way while we sort of managed and normalized this increased volume with fewer agents.
Excellent. So, Rajan, what rapid was so key, as Elsinore was talking about, in the the March and April timeframes. What specifically did the Google Contact Center AI team do to help speed up deployment processes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's interesting because I think both in all of our personal lives as well as in our businesses, we saw this incredibly quick but massive change that happened. And what was needed is that we needed an all hands on deck approach, both within Google and with our partners, to try to figure out how to approach this. And I'll have to tell you, in my 16 years here at Google, it's one of the proudest moments I've had because we've all really pulled together to figure out how do we solve the problems. And there were a couple of things that were really key there. The first was focusing in on the customer use cases that really mattered, and in particular the sectors that really mattered. So Elsinore was talking about all these new questions coming in that people hadn't had to answer before, and were going to these live agents. And so focusing in on solving those questions and reducing the load was really crucial for all the statistics that you see up here. And then the second thing was fast. How can we take things that sometimes customers were taking months to go to, and how can we do that in 2 weeks? And so that was the other big insight. We had to do a lot of work on our end to make it so that people could deploy this well in 2 weeks, and we had to critically work with Genesys to be able to do that so that it fits into their flow and that they're able to actually make this happen in a couple of weeks. And it was really about meeting those immediate critical human needs that were there, and it was amazing to see the success that happened as a result.
So I think one of the things that I've heard from both solution providers and from companies is that fast deployment is something that they think can persist going forward, that suddenly we have created new procedures and new operational metrics that will allow this to continue. So what are some of the other things that you think are changes that were made for the immediate response that are going to persist, Rajan?
Yeah, and it is interesting because I think that it's actually opened up people's eyes to what can be possible. And what happened was a few things. I think that many more organizations realized that by implementing AI, they could have this immediate benefit. And, I think we were seeing that. What you're seeing on the screen here is a survey that we did for some of the results that are there. And you can see that they saw these dramatic results. And as a result of that, people were realizing that this isn't just about COVID. They can apply these for a number of different things, both in terms of the rapid response types of applications that they have across, every industry, from whether it be retail or financial services or government or healthcare. But in addition to that, what they can do if they go further with this. And so it started many conversations around, okay, we did this. Now what's next? How can we make this this even better? And that's been great to see. And I think, in all of the things that I'm seeing with AI, this is one of the most effective areas of AI where AI can make a huge difference.
So I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball to you both now. So initial deployments and learnings, very often you'll hear enterprises say that it's really difficult when there's more than one vendor involved, that there's finger pointing and things get slowed down. So in these initial deployments and learnings, I'm going to go to Elsinore first. Are there new ways of working together with partners that, again, are going to persist over time?
We've been fortunate to have a long-standing relationship in our integration and the work that we're doing with Google. And what this particular partnership has given us is the ability to have best-in-class AI that is tied to a platform that's 100% focused on customer experience. And so because each one of us is bringing that focus to the table, some of these learnings going forward are about continuing to bring that, continuing to develop the AI capabilities with that lens, that maniacal focus lens on a exceptional customer experience. And there's certainly things that, as the deployments become more complex, as some of these use cases evolve, we'll continue to work through. But that particular focus on CX and best-in-class AI, I think, has been a home run for, definitely from the Genesys perspective.
And Rajan, any comments there?
Yeah, I think that the thing that we had to do really is break down borders between teams or boundaries between organizations and work together as a team, focusing on the North Star. The North Star is the customer need. How do we work together and apply both of our expertise to solving that customer need? And what's been really impressive about Genesys is that the Genesys team has decades of experience with customer service and customer experience. And so we're able to benefit from that and the fact that they're already working with many, many customers. And we have decades of experience in AI. That's one of the hallmarks of Google. And so by combining these together, we're able to create a solution that meets the customer need and is really designed around that customer, but brings in the latest of technology.
Excellent. So I'm going to move on to what's next. We talked about the immediate response. We talked about some of the learnings from that. But what comes next? And I'm going to start with Genesys. One of the tactics that we saw was an initial chatbot that would go on a website, but not necessarily be able to transfer to a live agent, which might be frustrating for a customer. So is that the kind of work that companies are now trying to sort of add on?
So we do see that, Sheila, but, before I answer that, one of the learnings that we see and persist, and Rajan was showing the statistics, which is we've seen a 14% increase in customer satisfaction with introducing these conversational agents. So both the customer side and the brand side, what we're seeing is a willingness to be able to move to more complex use cases. So where some of these initial conversational agents were really around the FAQs and sharing the knowledge, we're now seeing, in terms of what's next, moving to fulfillment or more complex use cases. The natural evolution of that is to bookend the conversational agent experience with things like agent assist. So yes, at some point, it isn't necessarily something that's self-contained, and we have to make sure that we promote that to an agent. But before doing that too, brands are now looking at what this new way of thinking of the customer journey, just given, some brick and mortar stores still being closed, and trying to think about what the customer journey looks like. So we have a customer, just to give you an example, it's a home appliance manufacturer. It's a joint Google Genesys customer. And they do have some voice bots with dialogue flow. But what they also use is one of our other AI offerings, predictive engagement. And what predictive engagement does is it actually follows a customer's experience through the website. So if at any point there's a moment of struggle or questions, that's the moment in which they can offer them that chat. So again, you start to see there the interaction between these two AI products working together. At that point, there's the ability to understand who the customer is, personalize that experience, be a little bit more proactive. So as that journey and that experience progresses, and it does ultimately require promoting it to an agent, then that agent has a little bit more information about the customer segment, the intent, the outcome that they're trying to achieve. So the what's next for us has been very clear in trying to bookend these conversational agents, certainly the conversational experience, certainly with the agent, but really thinking about what comes before that and what might be an experience, let's say, with a digital footprint.
Absolutely. So you talked a little bit there, Elsinore, about vertical use cases, right? And on this slide, we're showing all the different verticals that Google and Genesys have worked together on. So Rajan, can you, perhaps pick out a couple of these and talk about, what the first response was, that rapid response, and then what you see might be that next step for some of these verticals?
Sure. Well, I think the number one lesson is that it's all about solving a business problem and creating a business outcome. And, honestly, it's something I feel like I've learned the hard way with AI. A couple of years ago, as we all thought about AI, we were of the mindset of, hey, here's all this great AI, come and get it, and great things will happen. And the number one question that came back from customers is, okay, that's great, but how does it solve one of the business problems that is critical for me? And that's where this really comes in, is that I think there's an elevation of that, which is we can help make your contact center better. We can satisfy your customers in a much better way, and we can make your contact center much more efficient. But then there's a second elevation of that, which is what are the very specific things that this can help with. And you can see some of the cases that the use cases that are here. Retailers, all of a sudden, they had to go completely virtual. Companies that were not e-commerce companies had to become e-commerce companies and handle things like curbside pickup, which is a huge logistical load. But they're able to do that if they're able to apply AI to it. What I think is going to happen going forward is that we're able to meet the needs that are there with these immediate needs. But then there are two steps that happen after that. One is, how do we actually help the overall customer experience and increase customer satisfaction when the customer picks the phone or types into a chatbot and tries to contact a company? And so there are many things we can do to help the agent, to help the customer, to be more proactive with the customer and things like that. The second thing is the overall concept of customer experience. How do we optimize the overall customer experience as part of all of the channels that they talk to a particular company? How do we actually optimize that? And that's really where all of this goes. Can we make it so that 5 years from now, the experience that people have with a retailer, with their doctor, with their bank, with their government is just a much smoother experience? And that's where we're getting to.
It's interesting as I look at this verticals list, healthcare, one of the things that has boomed in this last few months is telehealth. So either one of you, Elsinore perhaps, is there a place for the contact center in the telehealth world? Because some of that seems to be a little bit more in the unified communications space. But has Genesys found itself being involved with some healthcare concerns as they try and roll out telehealth?
Yeah, absolutely, Sheila. And it's interesting because the emergence of that around telehealth also requires thinking about some cross-brand, cross-use case, type of situations. If you think about in a telehealth environment, they have to talk to a doctor, and now patients require certain specialized equipment or certain specialized medicine, for example. So I am familiar with some use cases where there's been some of this brands working together where there's an Uber type company that will be able to deliver some of the equipment needed or some of the medicines needed that are certified, that are associated following some of these telehealth type of conversations. And so we're going to start seeing, I think, an emergence of collaboration across these use cases in a way that's going to force brands working together to be able to provide a higher experience and a higher service level to customers. So I think it's really interesting what the current situation is going to require all of us as vendors to really think outside the box and try to facilitate some of that.
So the other one that I see here is unemployment claims. And I know that Google and Genesys work together on some of those scenarios. So Rajan, you want to talk a little bit about perhaps, again, how they started and how they may be morphing over time?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting to see, especially within government, a lot of local governments all of a sudden started to go towards using AI in their customer contact flow as a result of COVID. Unemployment claims were one of the biggest areas. And I mean, as we all know, unemployment claims skyrocketed during that time, and they were needing to handle a lot of inquiries very, very quickly. And so that was really a great way to solve a key need with governments. But there are many, many other needs within government, as you're seeing, things like, application status, benefits of eligibility, things like 311. These are things that this can now be extended to as well. And Sheila, on your point about telehealth, I think that is a really, really interesting one too. One thing that we've done is we've been working very closely with a lot of healthcare providers. And what we saw, not surprisingly, is that, in some cases, the majority of visits went to telehealth visits over the course of the last few months. But what we're also seeing is now that in-person visits are picking back up, still there's a lot of telehealth. Way beyond what there was before COVID. And we anticipate that that's going to be the case ongoing. We actually just made some big investments in telehealth that we announced this week. And I think that the contact center experience is crucial to that, because ultimately, again, it's the customer doesn't care if it is a contact center or if it's a doctor or whatever. They're just wanting to come to their healthcare provider and get very quick help where their wellness or their life actually really matters and is on the line with that. And I think that there's a lot that we can do with a combination of technologies to make that flow a lot better.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see even personal, PCPs, primary care physicians, suddenly making that available. Which they typically wouldn't have done in the past. So there's a whole acceptance of telehealth by consumers, but also there's much higher availability than we ever saw before. And I personally have been taking advantage of it on a pretty regular basis. So let's move on to what a lot of this means to the agent, because they're part of this as well. So Rajan, the self-service elements of contact center AI from Google were probably the first ones to come to market and get deployed. Can you give us an update on the Agent Assist, where your technology is used to help create that super agent, help an agent become smarter? Are there any anecdotes of how agents are adapting to having this new information and these new tools, what it means to them?
Yeah, definitely. And it has been really interesting to see as we've deployed with customers the kinds of things that we're seeing people start to do with Agent Assist. Because the reality is that there are a number of questions that can be answered in an automated way, for sure. And I think what we've seen with the virtual agent side of this is that we've really increased the number of questions that can be answered automatically. However, probably still the majority of questions are things that you need a human being to talk to the person and work through a flow and figure things out with that person. And so the agent experience is crucial. And Agent Assist has been very successful in reducing call times, and it does two things. One, it makes the call center more efficient, but then the other more important thing is that it makes the customer experience a lot better. And what it's really been doing is that it's really helping the agent have a strong sense of what kinds of things that they can suggest, and what's the menu of options that they can suggest given what the customer is talking about. And it shortens the amount of time that they can deliver help to the customer, which the customer has been really appreciating. And we've seen that from a lot of, for example, the user studies that we've been doing with Agent Assist in the contact center, and some of the direct experience with some of the deployments that we've seen.
So Elsinora, do Genesys customers typically begin with self-service AI and then move to Agent Assist? Or are there companies that have concentrating on improving the agent experience?
For our customers, there is definitely a lot of focus on improving the agent experience. It's a little bit of both, but definitely the agent experience. And the reason why we see that in so many of those customers is because we also have an entire workforce engagement management suite of products. And so when we step back and think about the agent experience, there's a couple of different facets to that. There's AI and what we're learning from the conversational bots and what we can do with this real-time information that we make available to the agents. There's also, and you've heard me speak a little bit about it, the element of being able to personalize the conversation with the customer. So at Genesys, we have made significant improvements in a design practice. And what that means for us as AI practitioners is we're doing all of this research to make sure that as we're delivering a lot of this AI, we're working with sponsor users, we're working with agents who are giving us real-time feedback in what they need and what's helpful to do their job. So when they now have all of these AI products and these capabilities that are coming at them, then we're also doing the work necessary so that an agent can synthesize the information we're giving them in 10 seconds. So when they pick up the phone and say, "Hi, Sheila, we understand that you're calling about X, Y, and Z," there's that level of personalization that is critical to the customer experience, and that, frankly, is empowering to the agent. And then at that point, we have the agent assist capabilities really shine with being able to take in the real-time transcription, and as Rajan was saying, make sure that they can confidently answer the question. But the flip side of that is also that with our WEM capabilities, it becomes, from an AI standpoint, a really rich set of data, of metrics, and a lot of information that is being generated through this product that can ultimately make our data and AI platform smarter, more efficient, can really fine-tune a lot of our models. And so a long way of saying that we are tuning both our customer experience and our agent experience simultaneously with AI, so that brands don't necessarily have to make a choice between self-service and the agent experience.
For both of you, one of the issues has been, how can an agent absorb the information that AI is going to deliver? So some of it is about the user interface. So have there been some learnings along the way as you've begun to deploy? I'm going to start with Rajan, but then obviously Sonora's nodding her head, so she's got a comment as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, one of the interesting things that we've done with our first customers is that we've used our user experience team and actually sent them into the contact centers to sit with a lot of the agents and just observe how do they do their day-to-day work. And that user experience is really, really crucial, because it is the difference between the customer being satisfied and the customer not being satisfied. And so we're putting a lot of work jointly in with our customers to figure out how do we optimize that user experience on the agent side. Also, of course, then there is the customer side, which is, I have a problem that I need solved by one of the companies that I interact with. How do I very quickly find what I need? How do I get the attention that I need? And I think the tendency in the past has always been, call the phone number, hit 0 as many times as I possibly can to get to a human, and then talk to a person. And I think what we're finding is that the combination of opening up multiple channels, whether it be a bot on the website, or opening it up such that you can communicate in via chat or via social channels, or making it such that there's a really clear and friendly and helpful voice that's there, that's an automatic voice that's there when they pick up. All of those things make it such that for the customer, that user experience is a lot better, and they actually like going with that virtual experience much more than they have in the past. And I think ultimately it really boils down to the nuances of the user experience to make that better.
Sonora, on the agent experience.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with everything that Rajan is saying. What I would add to that as well is, Genesys, we've built a customer data platform for real-time engagement. Now, what that means is you take everything that Rajan said, and now you multiply that over all of the different times that a customer has called into the brand. And so if you're an agent and you all of a sudden, you have somebody call and you see that this can be a continuation of a service call that happens, every couple of months that still hasn't been resolved. And so the aggregation of that data is really powerful because it allows you to, again, understand and acknowledge who your customer is, which is so key to that experience. But it has to be done in a way that the agent doesn't have cognitive overload, where you can really surface the most important pieces, still acknowledging that this seems to be the third call that this customer has made. And so let's make this the last call because we're going to help you. We've understood your problem, and now we're going to stay with you until it's resolved. And so part of, again, that agent experience is trying to balance. We want to personalize it. We want to understand who you are as a customer, and we want to reduce the cognitive load for an agent so that we're making you as efficient and as effective as possible in that moment. And it's an interesting challenge and a great challenge when you're thinking about AI, because there's a couple of different ways to solve that, and a couple of different ways to think about that. And as Rajan said, really, it comes down to spending quality time and putting yourselves and having that empathy for the agents so that whatever experience and however we're bringing these AI capabilities to life, it is with that in mind, making them efficient and effective.
Excellent. So we already started talking a little bit about consumers and how they interact with AI. And to one of the comments that Rajan made about, I have found what the substitute for 000 is in a chatbot. And it's if I try the chatbot and I don't feel like it really knows my intent, if I type in, I need to speak to a live agent, I would say 80% of the time it works. So you guys are doing your job because it should work. It should work. I should be able to get a live agent if I ask for one. But let's talk, Elsinore, about a specific customer. So we have a use case here of a Genesys customer that did a rapid deployment. So talk to us about this particular case and the consumer acceptance of artificial intelligence that was really embodied in this use case.
Yeah, this is a great use case for a number of different reasons. This is Todd Public Company Limited, and it's very interesting because we touched about government earlier, and we talked about state unemployment or some of the unemployment agencies, and Todd is a telephony provider a telco company owned and operated by the government of Thailand. And so we talk about, government, enterprise customers and their adoption of AI. And they approached Genesys and Google with wanting to provide something to their customers that helped them understand the increase or help them handle the increased volume that was natural, that followed, a good human conversation and that could handle probably a higher complexity in that conversation. And so the two companies work together to try to meet some of those needs vis-a-vis the increased demand. And this is a deployment that's live today, and they're seeing, really great improvements, and up to 2 minutes reduction in the average handle time. So what that goes to show, great. What that goes to show is that they've been able to handle just some of those incoming calls in a way that made it more effective, in a way that they were able to move through some of the concerns that they were, bringing to Todd. So great customer story, and goes to, when we talk about customer acceptance as well, just how government and some of these agencies have been a lot more open to just thinking about AI now as a way to creatively solve these challenges.
So back to this notion of consumer acceptance, Rajan, have you seen the businesses that Google is working with more willing, in 2020 now to roll out AI solutions more broadly, as opposed to the limited pilots that we talked about earlier? Do you think we've crossed a chasm of some kind with the use of artificial intelligence in customer care?
Yeah, I really believe that we have. And a little bit of context on this as I look over the last 3 years that I've been involved with our AI team here and over the entire portfolio of AI. One of the things that I had often been telling customers, and I think is still true, is that, now, or say a couple of years ago, was the equivalent of where the internet was in, say, 1994, where the average end user was just starting to see in 1994 what the kinds of things they could do with the internet that were really interesting and that could actually impact their lives. And then what we saw over the first 10 years from 1994 to say 2004 was the internet went from being this interesting novelty to something that was embedded into every single business and was critical to every single business. And we're going through that same flow right now with AI, just overall we are. I think that AI and customer care is the first big area to cross the chasm. And I'm seeing that, I saw that before COVID hit. And I think that what we saw with COVID is really accelerating that. And again, what it really boils down to are business outcomes. And if people can start to see business outcomes that matter to them, then it really it motivates them to want to do more with this. Last year, as we were doing broader contact center implementations, some of the things that we were seeing was a dramatic increase in the number of call deflections, a dramatic increase or dramatic decrease in call handle time, a dramatic increase in customer satisfaction. All three of those are metrics that really, really matter to any business that's out there. And so we've seen the interest in contact center go up quite a bit over the last year. But actually more than that, the real live deployments. And I've seen, very, very large contact centers now move fully to using contact center AI. And that's been a great thing to see. It's actually, I think, a model for the rest of AI and how AI can impact industries. And I think customer care has amongst the most potential.
So it's interesting that you talk about things that we might have thought about in the past, but we're changing. Things are changing about the way we think about AI. It was interesting when you talked about deflection there, because I remember, deflection used to be a dirty word, right, in a contact center. We don't want to deflect our customers. We want to take care of our customers. And I think there is more of an acceptance of deflection now. Maybe that's not, the best word, but the reason being that consumers want to be able to handle their interactions in a self-service way. So it's not really deflection. It's the way consumers actually want to interact with a business sometimes. So Elsinore, if we think about the market, sort of broadly, we came into this with a couple of notions, especially when Google Contact Center AI first came out. There was self-service and there was agent assist. Are there new things coming that are coming out of these early deployments? Are there new ways of thinking about, how we're going to use the Google Contact Center AI capabilities going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've hit it to saying that the conversational agent and the agent assist piece of it are still very paramount to that experience. But just as important, as I said earlier, is really rethinking what the entire end-to-end customer journey looks like. And from a Genesys AI standpoint, is really blurring the lines between some of the AI and MarTech and some of what we're seeing in customer experience. And what I mean by that, and we have a specific AI offering that really addresses that, which is predictive engagement. And, just to go back to the example you just said around deflection, you might have a customer that's on a website for a particular company and they're looking for answers to something. And what predictive engagement can do in the background is it kind of now understands the customer segments and the outcome that this customer is trying to achieve. And at some point, again, there's a moment of struggle, they kind of abandon it. And at that point, you can pop up the chat. Now, what can happen in this instance is a customer saying, I'm trying to find answers to X, Y, and Z. And the chat is able to redirect to the page that contains the FAQ or contains the knowledge within the existing website. And so these are examples of self-service. These are examples of containment that now start crossing that web experience with the conversational experience, with ultimately you've just supported a customer getting to the answers that they needed. So, you know, a lot of that extension into what is now what you would have traditionally considered to be more of the web optimization type use cases. So, you know, with predictive engagement, especially because, as I said, we understand your customer segments and we understand the outcome, then that makes the conversational and the agent assist experience just that much stronger. The other thing around that, around what customer wants, and is when we present this entire end-to-end journey, we'll get questions, especially on the AI side, that say, we know we can only handle 5,000 chats, let's say. And so if we look at the end-to-end experience and we're starting with customers that are somehow in their website, then it's really on us to try to use AI to help you as customers understand how to prioritize those 5,000 chats if that's all you can handle. Which ones get deflected, which ones are contained, which ones are the most important and valuable ones that you ultimately have to bring to an agent. And so as brands are fine-tuning their AI investment, it's about looking at that journey, helping customers optimize it, become smarter around it, so that they can make some of the best decisions on how to customers progress through this workflow. You know, make more informed decisions, knowing all the different levers that you can fine tune across something like predictive engagement and dialogue flow and agent assist.
So sort of a similar question for you, Rajan. When you think slightly longer term, are there shifts happening in the way Google approaches the market for conversational AI?
Yeah, and I think there definitely is. And I think that if I look longer term, I think that this becomes a third user interface. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. That from a user point of view, from a customer, our customer's customer, from that user's point of view, they really only care about two things when they call into a company or when they come to a company's website. They want to get their problem solved as quickly as they can, and they want to get their problem solved. They don't want to go away without an answer or without a resolution. That's really all that they care about, and they don't care to spend much more time than that. And so traditionally there have been two user interfaces. The user interface number one is you go to the website and you search on the website and you look through FAQs, et cetera, and you try to find an answer to your question in a self-service way. The second user interface has been I call in and I talk to a live human and I try to get my question answered. And there are variations of that with how you talk to you talk to an agent through a chat or you talk via the phone. There's a third user interface, which is conversational AI. We've discovered that in our consumer experience with Google overall, because what was happening with Google search is people wanted to search, but what we were finding is that the types of things people were entering into the search box was they were asking questions that need an immediate answer, or they wanted action on something. They wanted to take an action on something. And that's why we invented Google Assistant to begin with. And all of the things behind Google Assistant as a result of that. And we're finding that people's interaction with that new third user interface has made their experience to find information much, much better. I think the same thing can happen for every company out there. By introducing that third user interface, customers are going to get the action that they need and get the questions answered that they need much more quickly. And that just increases customer satisfaction, goes to those two goals that the end user has.
Excellent. So in sort of a rapid fire mode for this last question before we get to the questions from our audience members, so get ready with your questions. As large global tech company Google, I have to assume that your roadmaps are planned months in advance. Did the recent crisis cause Google Cloud to shift priorities, to to put some things on the near-term roadmap map that were maybe 6 months ago weren't even on the, have you shifted things around because of this? And then I'm going to ask you to answer the same question, Elsinora, when Rajan is done.
Yeah, I think that there are two things that have really shifted. One is that rapid implementation. And so we still are focused on how can we transform the customer care experience for a company. And that can last over the course of many years. But then the thing that we found with COVID, that we're finding post-COVID or in the midst of this that we think will happen post-COVID, is that rapid deployment. And so we've been putting a focus on how can we do things that are more self-service that can make it so that people can deploy in less than 4 weeks. And so we're doing a set of programs around that, and we have a set of products coming out around that to make that be the case. The second thing is the set of use cases in the industries that we're focusing on. Areas like government, for example, have really spiked in their usage, and so we're doing a lot more to try to figure out how can we take what we have and apply it to different industries that now have a much greater need than they did, say, 6 months ago.
Elsinore?
At Genesys, our AI strategy is really to have a very flexible platform, and that includes our own native technology, with partners such as Google. And really what it's done is it's built to be able to offer you as a customer maximum flexibility in where you've made your investments. So as we work towards rapid deployment and to getting some of these use cases stood up in a very short amount of time, that type of flexibility has been really, really validating because we've been able to meet customers where they are. So, it's been wonderful to have that validated. What we have heard from customers as we worked with them is, we love your strategy, but we need it in 127 languages. So we definitely had to think about accelerating our language capabilities, because this is something that is globally accelerated, and all of the brands want to be able to offer them in those local languages. And so we are definitely looking at ways to scale our language capabilities.
Excellent. So I'm going to move this to the next slide, and I'm going to let the two of you speak to it, because you guys know how best to speak to this slide. And why don't we start with the left? We'll start with Elsinora.
Yeah, as we kicked off saying, this has been a really great partnership in what we can offer customers with, best-in-class AI. And as we said, that big focus on CX. If there's one thing, that I want you to take away from what Genesys can bring, is that we are looking at that end-to-end journey for the customer that may start with a phone call, that may start with the web experience, and really focusing on that omni-channel conversation with the customer and orchestrating it. And what we mean by orchestration is really being able to support the workflow, regardless of where it starts, in a way that makes sense for you as a customer. And that really is the flexibility of how the platform is built and how we bring in partner integrations to be able to support that experience. To that, we continue to add and augment that experience with other types of capabilities, AI capabilities that may be part of our WEM platform, routing capabilities. But at the core of it, again, is really thinking about the customer at the center and how we support that best possible experience, regardless of what channel it may have started, and helping you resolve whatever that may be with the right level of effectiveness, efficiency, and empathy.
And Rajan, I think it's your time to now say how great Google is. No.
Well, I'll go back to something that we talked about earlier, which is that North Star. The North Star is how do we meet customers' needs? And I think what's great about this partnership is that you have a company like Genesys that is the best in customer experience and has decades of experience in customer experience. And you bring that together with what we're doing in AI. And Google, we talk about Google as an AI first company, and we really mean that. We've integrated AI into every product from Google that you use on the consumer side or on the enterprise side has AI integrated into it. And so we've invested deeply in becoming the leaders in AI and having the best infrastructure, having the best capabilities that are out there. And if you bring these things together, you can really create transformative experiences that improve customer satisfaction. And that's really what we're focused on.
Excellent. So I'm now going to turn it over to Eric, who will moderate our Q&A.
All right. Thanks very much, Sheila. And of course, thanks, Rajan and Elsinora, for a great discussion, and just really interesting and encouraging to hear about all these developments and the speed that they're happening in. So the first question we have is a question about kind of specific to the integration, and so I'll throw it to both Rajan and Elsinora. And we're being asked, what is the status of the integrations between Dialogflow and Genesys Cloud? So I don't know if one of you would prefer to go first. Or...
So Dialogflow is completely integrated with Genesys. I mean, it is one of our strategic integrations for conversational AI. So if that is something that you are looking to have somebody reach out and talk about what your options are, that is absolutely something that we can do today.
And Rajan, anything to add? Or?
No, I think that well covers it. Dialogflow is really the heart of a lot of our capabilities, and so we've deeply integrated that in with Genesys, along with all of the other parts of this, our Agent Assist product, and a variety of other parts of the contact center portfolio. Okay,
great. Thanks very much. The next question, I'll start with. Actually, I think I'll start with Sheila, because you've covered this kind of across the industry. And can speak to it as a broader trend. They're asking, how is cloud critical, cloud service is critical to adoption of AI for contact centers? Actually, this is kind of a two-part question, and I'll save the second part for after we do this, because it's a little in another direction. But first of all, what's been the role of cloud in allowing AI to be adopted? And Sheila, I'll start with you.
And I should take myself off mute before I answer. So I was going to, as I was saying, Genesys is a great example of the path that cloud has played in artificial intelligence. Initially, when they started working with their very biggest customers, who were premises-based customers. And there came a point where a decision was made that the only place to do artificial intelligence was going to be in the cloud, because the data is what was necessary. And if you couldn't rapidly get access to all of the data in real time, then it was not going to be true artificial intelligence. Now, what's happened now is that and I feel like I'm telling Elsinora's story for her, but you can take, and it's not just at Genesys, at other companies as well, you can take Google Contact Center AI and apply it in premises solutions, but it is cloud on top of premises. The AI is happening in the cloud. And so those decisions are being made in the cloud based on the data that's in the cloud. So, I think there was a moment when we thought we could do AI on premises. That's gone away. But now premises customers can take advantage of it. But all the AI is in the cloud. Good work, Google.
Yeah. To expand on that, Eric, via hybrid, and what we're seeing now, especially in some of these use cases where there is now an appetite to look at these workflows in the cloud, is some of these enterprises are moving those that are more related to AI first as part of some of this transition to the cloud. So it's definitely paving the way for some of those transition, migration, transformation discussions.
One thing I'll add to that is that there are three big reasons why cloud is so important here. The first is as Sheila was pointing out, the processing power that's there. A lot of these models that we're talking about require major compute to be able to process that and to be able to train that, and that's where the cloud really comes into play. The second is scale, being able to handle this across millions of interactions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or even billions of interactions, and cloud can scale to be able to do that. And then the third is innovation, and I think that's really critical in AI. An AI model doesn't stand still. It gets better and better and better over time. And so you can see that with our voice models, for example, that literally every day it is getting better. And so you can really do that well in the cloud because you can continually update that and make it better and better.
Makes sense. That is one of the things that we hear across the board with cloud is just the continual feature upgrade and flexibility just continues to grow. There's a second part of the question that I mentioned that's really a different question, but I think it's a really interesting one and an important one for enterprises. And I'll throw it maybe to Rajan first, just to mix things up. They're asking, how does a business get their data ready for AI? It's not necessarily a simple thing, or it's the data that you have may not be just. It may take some effort to make it ready for AI. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a very fair statement. I think that data is the most important part of AI, and over time we're getting it so that the creation of a model is getting easier and easier. The deployment of a model is getting easier. But the data is the part that you have to focus in on, because if you put the wrong data into a model, you get the wrong outcomes with that. And so I think the first thing to start with is the purpose of what you're trying to achieve, and then figure out what are the right data points in which systems you need, and where do you need to get them to. One great thing with conversational AI is there are definitely things that are essentially already pre-trained that can help you. So for example, our voice models, we've been honing the voice models for phone call interactions for a long time, and you can just benefit from that instantly right away. But then the next part, what you have to think about is your conversations. What types of call flows are coming in, and how do you handle those conversations? What are the intents that are happening, and those kinds of things? And that, we're getting better and better at making that easier for customers to do. But you need that data about the types of interactions that are happening in your contact center.
Elsinora, any kind of specific tips on what some of your customers have done to approach this?
Yeah, this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart because I spent 20 years in data and analytics. And for a really long time, the stats out there is 80% of AI projects fail because you have to have major data transformation initiatives, and you have to think about what that looks like. And so one of the most important messages that I feel we bring when we talk about the Genesys data and AI platform is that we make data AI ready. And you can't underscore how important that is to be able to actually speed up the adoption. So if we take, and expand on what Rajan was saying, benefits of working with Google, who's continually training and already giving what we're feeding the data and AI platform in the right data schema, just ready to be used by models, is so important. I mentioned the WEM platform earlier. We've got a series of data and a series of metrics that is being collected continually, and that is in real time being captured by a lot of these models. And so from a customer standpoint, we really begin by saying you can start using, adopting, deploying, and seeing the benefits of AI without really having to think about these major data transformation initiatives. So again, we work really hard to make sure that your data is AI ready.
Well, and that's a great point. I mean, because we've emphasized so much the, accelerating AI adoption. And if somebody's looking at it and saying, I know my data is a mess, and I know that it's just not really where it needs to be, there's a way still to get into AI quickly and not have to go that route. Right.
I remember talking to a Genesys salesperson years ago, literally in the 90s in Australia, and they said they had sold CTI to a customer, and they went to the customer to start doing the implementation process and found out that they had no customer database, right? So there was no way to do screen pops because there was no place to do it from. And luckily, we've come a long way from that time where we got almost too much data. So it is nice to hear that there are ways to get it up quickly with some quick templates or whatever, and then let the system learn over time.
Great. And with that, we're just about out of time for this webinar. I put up a slide to remind everybody, check out our sponsors for some more resources. I want to thank Genesys and Google Cloud for sponsoring the webinar, and everybody in the audience for attending. And of course, again, thanks Sheila, Elsinora, and Rajan for the great conversation. Within the next 24 hours, the audience is going to receive a personalized email follow-up with some details and links to find the presentation on demand. And please do share that with others who might also enjoy the event or get something out of it who didn't attend. The webinar is copyright by Informa. Presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by Enterprise Connect and Genesys and Google Cloud, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. So on behalf of our guests today, again, I'm Eric Kraft. Thanks for your time and have a great day.